Due to a communication error, this video had to be re-uploaded, but all errors should have been revised. I apologize for the inconvenience, but still, enjoy the stories. What is that figure in the trees? The one that sounds like my long-dead father. This world is a strange one. Don't go into the woods alone. Heck, don't go into the woods at all if you enjoy living. There are strange and terrible things out there. Some of those things are hungrier than others. Gamer and voiceover artist Terrence Nicholson helps me narrate these allegedly true forest encounters. Give him a sub if you like what he's got. And if you enjoy my channel, be sure to consider donating to my Patreon for shoutouts, bonus episodes, and more. Or get some of these awesome t-shirts, links in the description. Now, let's go out into the woods today and see what's been seeing us. Number 1. There was something hunting us. Submitted by Jamie. This happened a few years ago. I think I was in the 6th grade. One of my friends invited me and a few others over to her house to watch the new season of one of our favorite shows. Let's call my friend Callie. Well, we had been playing in a creek near her house when she told us of a neat park, and it was only a short walk away. We all thought that sounded great, so we decided we were going to take her large dog with us for protection. I can't remember the breed, but she was short-haired and reminded me of a greyhound. Her name was Sweetie. She lived up to that name since all 5 of us were greeted with wet, slobbery licks each time she saw us. We had a dinner of pizza and ice cream with root beer floats to wash it down. It was probably around 7 when we left the house. Now I want to describe Callie's house. It was old and 2 stories tall with a basement where her brother slept. All the windows had large bars on them. The place had a backyard with an ancient tree, and the ground was slightly overgrown. A rickety fence with a broken metal gate led to a small, dimly lit alley. Similar alleys crossed around the neighborhood, and there weren't too many street lights, so everything was in a washed-out yellow light. We left around 7 from the backyard and started up the alley. Again, Sweetie was with us, since she needed a walk anyway, and we hoped that we might be able to get to the park before nightfall. On the way there, nothing really happened. We had to cross a bridge that an interstate highway ran beneath. The bridge trembled each time a large truck rumbled below. I was terrified of heights by then, and all I could think of was the bridge collapsing to the road below. But none of my friends were scared. So, trying to act brave, I slowly followed them across. On the other side of the bridge, there was only a single 7-Eleven that illuminated the forest and the space around it. There wasn't anyone around, and every one of us was on edge. We stopped at the brink of the woods. We could have gone around, but it would have taken longer, and there was a path in the trees that led straight to the park. We stopped on the edge of the forest and looked in. The youngest of us, Stella, clung to my best friend's arm. She was visibly terrified. Callie had given her Sweetie's leash as we were walking, so she felt safer. I think we were standing there for a minute, maybe 2, before Sweetie began to growl, and the fur on her back stood on end. A shadow in the forest darted from behind a tree to hide behind another tree. That was the last straw. We decided to leave, and maybe we'd see the park another day. Callie went first, with Stella following close behind, still clinging to Sweetie's leash. The dog was pulling her ahead, apparently desperate to get away from that forest and that figure. Hannah and Dove followed. I was dead last, still unwilling to cross that bridge again. The entire time we walked towards it, we heard footsteps around us and a sound that seemed similar to the call of a large bird, with a hiss of a reptile mixed in. The first time I heard that sound, I was so scared I couldn't move, until Callie looked back and called for me to keep going. She was easily braver than I was. Terrified and curious, I looked into the woods behind me. I live in a heavily wooded area with bears, coyotes, and just about every Rocky Mountain creature you could think of. I hoped that if I recognized this animal, we might be able to delay our crossing the bridge. But then I saw it, a pair of yellow eyes, probably 7 feet off the ground, staring at us. A shiver ran up my spine. It was the feeling of being watched by something wanting to hunt you. Then I watched as it lowered its massive self to the ground, sniffed a spot where my foot had been, then moaned a word. Jamie. It said my name. Needless to say, I ran after my friends, crying in fear and disbelief. We didn't look back. We never talked about this story, none of us in my little group of friends. I'm not sure if they heard this thing speak like I did. Besides, I didn't feel like speaking at all that night, and I could barely even breathe for the remainder of that evening. Now, every little crack or shift I hear outside my window is enough to keep me up all night. Number 2. The Man Across the River. Read by Terrence Nicholson.
Here's a little backstory. I'm 15 years old, and I was at my little brother's baseball game. It was a more isolated area where there were only a few lights. I'll give a short description of the place. There's a little stream which leads into a river, one stone bridge that goes over the stream, a batting cage type of thing, and there was a forest across from the river. It was an extremely dense forest, and the only light I had was my phone and the moonlight. Even then, it was still hard to make out something. So here's where it begins. I was the only older kid there, and there was just a bunch of little kids running around the bleachers. So of course I was bored, and I just walked around playing on my phone for most of the time. I walked over to the batting cages and I began to climb it. I then get to the top of the cages, and just sitting there watching the forest, I heard a branch snap, but I brushed it off, not even thinking twice of it. Around an hour went by of doing nothing, hearing nothing, and seeing nothing. I decided to go head to the stream just to chuck some pine cones into it and watch them slowly float away. I then turned around to begin heading back. But something moved in my peripheral vision, and I quickly turned to see what it was. I saw him, or it, standing there looking straight into my soul. I then reached into my pockets to grab my phone to turn on my flashlight. The silhouette then moved back into the woods. I thought it could just be a late night hiker just wanting to see the game. I brushed it off and continued to do my own thing. I then saw a flash of light coming from the forest. I looked towards it to see that there was nothing. I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but I saw it again, the same looking flash from the same area. This time, I only used my eyes to look, and I saw the flash again, coming from a bush. I then had a thought. I pulled out my phone and pretended to start talking on it. I walked to the edge of the river and sat there looking slightly up to the river. I stopped talking to see a dim light from the bush, and as I saw that, I heard a bunch of rustling in the bushes. I then saw the same person, or what I believed to be the same person, get up out of the bush. My heart sank as I realized what he or she was doing. They were taking photos of the game, or me. I sincerely hope this person was put behind bars, and I hope no one has to go through something like this. I've never gone to that field again, and this is the first time I've shared this story.
Number 3. Search and Rescue Mystery. Submitted by Aaron. I'm from Ireland, and the event I'm about to tell you about is real, and sometimes I have trouble sleeping at night because of it. Now, Ireland is not a very big country, but that doesn't mean it's not without its dangers. I'm a search and rescue officer of 20 years, but by far this event has made me more terrified and sick than any other. The region I'm from has one forest split into two by a road going through the middle. One day, I got a call about a mother who said her son went walking on the road earlier, but he didn't come back. He was supposed to be back a long time ago. I didn't think too much of it. I've had plenty of these calls before. Usually in cases like this, the kid either fell and hurt himself, or he just got lost. But in this case, I've never been more wrong. I grabbed the dog and I set out into those woods, near the same road the boy had last been seen. These woods have been known for some really notorious gang activity, and not too long before this incident, there had been a few stabbings. But the moment I began stepping into the woods, it didn't feel like that. I had this uneasy gut feeling. Everything was off. The way the air smelled, the silence of the forest, the unexplained fear inside me. As it was twilight and night was soon approaching, I turned on my flashlight and headed to my left, deeper into the forest. Every step I took, I felt more and more on edge, but I pushed through for the sake of this kid. It was not as deep or dense as the other half of the forest, so I assumed the find would be easy, that I would come out of these woods in no time with the boy in hand. At least, that's what I prayed under my breath. But then it happened. I heard this scream from the other side of the forest. I dropped my flashlight in surprise, and then I sprinted, following the sound. My dog was barking, chasing behind me. I got to the road up ahead, and I stopped. Now the scream had turned into the most evil and inhuman sound of laughter, and seconds later, it was all silence. The dread I felt there made me want to throw up. I felt like my life was in danger. I ended up calling the police, telling them that I'd seen something in this area. They told me to stay put until they got there, but I didn't listen. A few steps further in, I found the boy's jacket and his phone, and the blood on those items told me that he may be gone. When the police arrived, they checked everywhere, but they did not find the boy. I blamed myself for what happened that night, but I also knew if I went too far into that forest, I would not be here to type this. I can't help but think about the fact that if this was a gang, one of their trademark things is to bury people alive. If that's what happened to this poor kid, I know it sounds bad, but I hope he's long dead and did not have to suffer. The more I think about those screams that night, I remember them being muffled, and I couldn't help but thinking that the police should have been looking underground. Number 4. The Thing in the Forest, read by Terrence Nicholson, and submitted by E. the Man.
Okay, before I begin, I want to say that this story took place on Vancouver Island in BC, Canada. I live in Vancouver and I love my family, and I usually go to Vancouver Island with my dad, mom, and brother to visit my dad's side of the family. We stay at our grandparents' house where they have a pool, wood pile, a garden, a small field, and a circle of forest in their backyard. My uncle lives on the property by the edge of the forest in his house right by the field. So me and my cousin, who's about 2 years younger than me, like to go into the forest. But after this night, I get skeptical every time I look in its direction. Day 1, we went into the forest with some tools to go build some forts. We had almost finished one, and it wasn't too deep into the woods, so we could still see the houses through the bushes. We started building and chopping dead trees when my little cousin joined us. She was my other cousin's little sister, who was so innocent on the outside and evil on the inside, but you could never guess. I'm a city boy, but my cousins live on a farm, so they knew more than I did about this forest, as I also didn't live there. So they knew more about this than I did about this forest. It's about 2 p.m. and the sun is starting to move down, but we continue working. My cousins were at the edge of our property when we saw a tree fort that looked abandoned in a clearing. We steered clear of that place. We also found car parts, which was weird because it's in a forest, but that moment the neighbors' dogs came out, and they're vicious. At the very same moment, I felt eyes on me, a feeling I had never even felt before. Shivers ran down my spine. I turned around to see nothing. Just trees. We hightailed it out because we didn't want to mess with those dogs. One followed us to the edge of the forest, and I took out my knife and yelled at it, which made it retreat back into the forest reluctantly. I saw its eyes didn't have malice, but fear. Later that day, we went back in armed with knives and axes and started to build some more, when I heard snuffling like a bear, except this sounded different than a bear. I told my cousin to get his things and get out, and as we were leaving, I turned my head around and I saw it. It was tall, really tall, and it was on all fours sniffing around the base of a tree. I guess it was at least 8 feet tall, but that was not what made me sprint to the house. It was that it was humanoid with the body of a bear and the head of a wolf with what looked like white deer antlers. It stopped, rose up, and now I could see that it was at least 10 feet tall. It turned its head and looked me in the eye. Its eyes were black and haunting. And then it waved at me. It fucking waved at me before going on all fours again. I said to my cousin, "Run," and we ran, and I'm glad we did, because he didn't turn his head while we ran, and I didn't want him near that thing. The next day we went to the forest edge, and then I saw it again. And I said, "Look, let's not go in there. I see something." My cousin protested, but I won, and we headed back inside. He asked me what I saw, so I lied and said, "Oh, yesterday I saw a bear, and today I saw the neighbor's dog." He believed it and didn't ask further questions. I've not shared this with anyone, ever until now. And I think that what I saw was a Wendigo, but what I thought was, how the hell did it get onto an island, much less my grandpa's forest? I've never gone back there without at least 3 knives with me ever since. Now I'm even scared to look at it, because I'm afraid I'll see that thing again.
Number 5. A Terrifying Hunt. Submitted by Nobody. Let me begin by saying that I'm definitely not a substance abuser. No drugs, no excessive drinking, none of that for me. On the night this happened, I was stone cold sober. Anyway, the outdoors has always called to me. I love hiking, camping, weekend off-grid survival training, and hunting. And during one hunting session, I had an experience that I truly hope to forget. Here in my neck of the woods, the winter nights get truly cold, and the coyotes have grown their winter fur. So I decided to bundle up with warm clothes and head out for my first predator hunt of the season. I was going to try calling in some coyotes with an electronic recording of a distressed rabbit. That normally does bring the coyotes running, hoping for an easy meal. I set the electronic calling device out in a field about 75 yards away from where I planned to hunker down. I got myself under a white blanket and waited for the little predators to come creeping in. My rifle of choice is an AR-15, and on a friend's recommendation I had loaded a magazine with 20 rounds of a new type of varmint hunting bullet. They've got these green plastic tips that make them extra deadly on coyote-sized game. They come in boxes of 20, and I only bought 1 box to try. Why I'm telling you this will become clear later. The night was moonless and pitch black. To see on nights like that, I use an old-style night vision setup. It's kind of like what they used in Vietnam. It isn't as clear or efficient as the newer types of night vision, and it's awkward to use with a rifle scope. But it is cheap, and it does the job I need it to. It works by projecting a beam of infrared light. It can only be seen by looking through the monocular, so basically like an invisible flashlight. I'm not sure how long I'd been out waiting, but it was freezing cold, and so far I hadn't seen any signs of life. I thought that was odd, as this area is normally lousy with coyotes, but I figured a storm must be coming in or something else like that only an animal's instincts could detect. Feeling like packing it in and calling it a night, I shifted my position and I took one more quick scan around the field with my monocular. I suddenly saw something off to the left. Something seemed to be moving at the edge of the tree line along the field's northern edge. I watched intently to try and make out what that shape was. It soon became clear that it was not moving in the trees, but above them. At first I thought it was maybe a helicopter in the distance, but still it was totally silent. And at this distance, a chopper would be very loud. Plus it had no lights or anything like that I could see. This thing looked to be moving very slowly westward and seemed just above the treetops, maybe 70 to 100 feet off the ground. But that's my estimate. The shape was rectangular or maybe cylindrical, and it didn't appear to have any wings or other protrusions. I was too busy trying to figure out what the craft might be to realize I may be in danger. That changed quickly. Fascination turned to fear, as this thing made a slow 90-degree turn, and immediately came straight toward me. By this time, it was clear that this was not a human craft, it was otherworldly. Now, I'm not a coward, but seeing that thing floating towards me out there all alone and with almost a half-mile between me and the safety of my home, well, let's just say it's far from a good feeling. By the time I got to my knees and grabbed my rifle, I felt a splitting pain in my head, like what I imagine a migraine must feel like. It felt as though my skull was going to crack open. Rolling onto my back in the snow, I shouldered my rifle and tried to line up the night vision with the scope on my gun, but the pain was so bad, my eyes didn't want to work right. I remember firing blindly at where I thought the thing might be, and that's all I remember. Because the next morning, I woke up in my bed, feeling exhausted and weak. I was so sick for the next couple of days that I called my sister and I asked her to come check in on me and make me some soup, as even getting out of bed for longer than a few minutes was difficult. I honestly thought I had dreamed the whole thing, until a few days later when I felt better, I had decided to clean my rifle and I noticed that it was still loaded, but there were only 7 bullets with little green plastic tips. Where were the other 13? And number 6, The Thing in the Woods, read by Terrence Nicholson, and submitted by Zach.
For a little insight, I'm currently 20 years old, and this happened back when I was 14 years old. To be completely honest, I always believe that some things are out there that we simply can't explain. This all happened on a nice summer day in Florida. I was going over to my friend Chris's house to spend the day with him. In his backyard, he has a little patch of woods about 30 yards or so away from his back door, which so happened to be a sliding glass door. I walked through that door ever since his family started piling things near the front door for some reason. As I walked in, I saw Chris playing video games in the living room as usual. I said, "Hey Chris, where's your parents?" His response was, "At work." But something didn't sound right in his voice. He was usually the happy-go-lucky type of guy. I asked what was wrong, and what he said had caught me off guard. He said, "Something is living in those woods that isn't normal." You can imagine what it was like hearing that at 14 years old. Not the best thing that could have been said. I casually said okay as I tried to play it off as if it didn't bother me, but it really shook me. I asked Chris what he meant. This is what I remember him saying that stuck with me. "It comes at night only when the moon is the biggest in the sky." Now, if that isn't the most ironic and just cliche thing, then I don't know what would be. It so happened to be that night as well, he explained shortly after. Chris later followed up all of this and asked me if I wanted to stay the night. I really didn't want to, but I felt like he needed me there for him to calm down. So I sadly agreed, and I really wish I didn't. The day rolled on and flew by. Before I realized it, the sun was already setting and the night was upon us. Not gonna lie to you all, I was nervous because the way he said it only comes at night. So as the sun went away and the moon was full, we still sat in the living room playing Call of Duty until about 8 p.m. When out of literally nowhere, I felt eyes on me. Like a giant brick wall hit me with this emotion all at once. I looked out into the woods and of course couldn't see anything. I asked Chris if he feels off or like he's being watched. He agrees he feels the same. So immediately after that, we both bolted into his room. Mind you, his dad doesn't get home until 11:30 p.m. Minutes roll by and we both decided we should go back out there. As we walk out his bedroom door, something in me said, "Don't go back out." But I didn't listen because I wanted to be the badass 14-year-old who isn't afraid of anything. We get into his living room. Chris at this point is in near tears. I asked if he still felt like he was being watched, and he said yes. We both figured it was coming from the woods. I asked Chris if he had any source of light to shine out the woods. He ran into his parents' room and grabbed a flashlight. We both stepped outside with this feeling still upon us. I snatched the flashlight and walked about 20 yards out and scanned the tree line of the woods. I must have scanned about 85% of the tree line when the light struck these two, what I thought for a second was yellow headlights, peering behind a tree about 3 to 4 feet off the ground. I thought it didn't make sense. I stayed on it, not moving, half because I was curious, and half because I couldn't move out of pure terror. I can tell you I felt like it was only me and whatever was making these headlights appear. I was frozen. Then I snapped, because I saw these headlights come out to be eyes. I watched them gain about another 3 to 4 feet in height. Chris screamed, and I heard him run back inside. A moment passed, and I saw its claw grip a tree that was in front of the tree it was hiding behind. This claw, I swear, could have gripped a full-size dog with no issue. Once I saw that, I booked it into his house and slid the door closed and locked it, knowing full well a piece of glass isn't going to stop this thing. I screamed for Chris to hide, and he already did so. I hid behind the couch that was about 6 or so feet away from the sliding door, praying this thing wouldn't come up to the house. I heard this crunching sound coming from outside the glass door. I wanted to pop my head up and try to see what it was, but in all honesty, I didn't have the balls to. I heard panting and a weird type of snorting, like if you were trying to smell something too hard. It had to have been at least 9 p.m. at this point. I heard some more of those sounds. Then I whispered to Chris, hoping he was close by to where he could hear me. I faintly heard, "Yeah." I asked what it was, and he said he didn't know, but it had to be at least 7 feet tall. I'm guessing he had some view of the creature to get an assumption like that. I heard a loud bang, then a growl coming from the right of the screen door. My instinct was to hop up and see what it was. I turned on the flashlight again and put my hand over the light, gathering enough courage to pop up when I did and swung the light towards the door. I saw nothing. Absolutely nothing. Then, just like in the horror movies, this thing walked into view. I saw, and only for a few moments, but what felt like years. Thick brown fur, long, what seemed to be black claws and a snout. With those same yellow eyes. It had to be a damn werewolf. Thinking it's over and it will kill me because it saw me. What struck me the most was the eyes. When we locked eyes, I felt lifeless. I felt nothing but pure predatory instinct. I was a sitting duck. Then, from outside, I heard 2 pops and a grunt and some sort of cry from what I'm guessing was this beast. Chris's dad had a concealed carry permit, which for those who don't know what that means, it means he can carry a pistol with him as long as he keeps it hidden and out of sight. Chris's dad ran into the house after I'm assuming the creature ran off. Chris leaped into his dad's arms and began sobbing, begging to make sure it didn't come back again. His father said no one is sleeping in the living room tonight and that we would all sleep in his room. I was never so happy. Needless to say, no one slept that night. I never went back to Chris's house after that, and we eventually had a falling out because of this night. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, want to say this is made up or exaggerated, but this is what happened. Hell, I would even call BS on my post. We aren't alone. These woods aren't empty. There are things I can't explain, nor can science. Thank you for listening to my experience.
Thank you all for listening, and a big thanks goes out to Terrence Nicholson for joining us tonight. Be sure to subscribe to his channel if you love his voice. Also, a heartfelt thank you goes out to all my new patrons. They are Raven Cemetery, Michael Rakicki, Fun with Failure, Amanda Hertel, Miranda Gu, Melissa Blakesley, Mr. Siosku, The Paranormal Network, Lena Crystal Rodriguez, Matthew Bergman, Y.E. Hayes, Oscar Flores, Alexandria Johnson, and Amy Lane. For those of you who pledge 25 or more, I'll be getting those bracelets soon and sending them your way. Until then, enjoy those bonus episodes. And to the rest of you out there, if you want your own shout out, become a patron of mine at patreon.com/darknessprevails. It really helps this channel. Otherwise, stay out of the woods before those nightmare creatures make you their one-course dinner. Good night. Be sure to send us your true scary stories at deathbyfear.com. Thanks, guys.